Hello everyone, welcome to the SFS April 2022 Community Call. Very excited to have you all join us this evening. Thank you for making me part of the conversation. If you don't know what Sustainable Fashion Scotland is, we are a community-led non-profit, and our main mission is to connect the fashion community in Scotland as well as accelerate collective action for sustainable fashion transformation. So we are community-led, trying our best to do that as much as possible. So that's why it's so important that you're all here tonight. So thank you. Oh, hi, Claire. We've just started. As I said, we are recording. Currently, none of our past calls are online yet, which has just been on that to-do list for a while. But I've decided we're going to start with this one and then work our way backwards. So this should be online within a week, 2 weeks max. So that's exciting. So you'll be able to watch this back as well. And if you would like to say hello in the chat, if you've not said hello yet, maybe just to say roughly who you are, what you do. And I'm also interested in where you're from, because we do often get people across Scotland on online calls, which is nice. So yeah, do feel free to say hello in the chat and hello later in person if you like to do. Just a couple of updates about SFS, and then I'm going to pass on to our guest speaker tonight, which is Hannah Clinch. So at SFS, we just had our second birthday party in March. So thank you if you came on to that. It was nice to do another in-person event since we hadn't done one since our launch in February 2020, just before lockdown hit. So that was very fun. There is a video on our Instagram showing you a bit of what happened there if you'd like to watch that. And also there is a online exhibit on our website featuring some people's work from across Scotland. So check that out as well. Very proud of it. We're after that event, we're kind of having some space to breathe and figure out what our next steps are. So we're still having a lot of conversations with people, which is very exciting. There's still a lot of energy. We just had Fashion Revolution Week, which is very inspiring. So we're having a strategy refresh couple of meetings and talks in the next few weeks. And then we'll be, getting community feedback on what that looks like to fit with our capacity and where the most impactful opportunities are for change and collective action. So very excited to welcome more of you to get involved later this year as well. Tonight is a community call, so it's all about inviting people from the community, fashion community in Scotland, to share their practice, ask questions, learn from each other, share your own thoughts and experiences. We really appreciate everyone being here. No one's like an expert. We all have our own lived experiences, so please do feel free to speak later on and share your thoughts. We really value them and you being here. Tonight we have Hannah Clinch, who is a designer who's going to introduce herself in just a second. But the question we are discussing tonight is, how can we strengthen design and material reuse networks in rural places? And this is a really important topic for us at SFS because most of our team is based in the Central Belt, but we really want to make sure we're being as inclusive as possible and expanding our reach and impact to rural areas and amplifying the great work being done across Scotland. So yeah, Hannah's going to speak for about 10 minutes, introduce herself and her practice and the topic we're discussing tonight. And then we're going to have an open discussion. So feel free to share your thoughts either in the chat or mic. You can pop your hand up if you would like to, which is under the reactions button on the bottom if you can't quite jump in, and I'll try and keep an eye on that. Otherwise, we will send an email over the weekend or early next week with some links and resources that Hannah would like to share with you, and the link to the recording as well. And then we will have some insights to share in the next few weeks, but that will take us a little more time to get those done. So thank you very much for being here. And if you have any technical questions, you can message in the chat or DM Lisa or myself and we'll help you out. But I'm going to pass over to Hannah now. So over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, Marie. So can everyone hear me? Okay. Yeah, cool. Right, I'm just going to share my screen then. Hopefully you should be able to see a big tacit, yeah? Great. Okay, so I'm Hannah and I have a company called Tacit, which my little strapline is designed for positive growth. So I tend to work with organisations that are social enterprises and looking at sort of recycling and reuse and community-led action on climate change. I grew up in a village in the Midlands, and I suppose my lifetime interest in community waste management started quite young because every couple of months somebody would say the words jumble sale, and often it was because there was a cause that the community had identified, and we had lots of halls where I grew up, lots of village halls and school halls and church halls. And so jumble sales were a really simple way of a community coming together to raise money for a cause and to obviously get stuff reused. And I suppose, like many of us probably sitting here tonight, there was a real thrill in being able to take a stack of 2 and 10p's and clothe myself and renew my toy collection through jumble sales. But that love of jumble sales is really about, because one of the things that was also really important is it meant that lots of people in the village kind of came together, and there was like tea and cheap biscuits served, and that love of those spaces and that community was something that really just stayed with me. When I sort of moved up to Glasgow to study textiles at the art school, I had a new way of experiencing those places where people come to reuse goods. This book here is an audit of Glasgow's assets, really, and it dedicates a chapter to each part of the city's sort of infrastructure. And one of the chapters in this book is dedicated to cleansing and waste management. It's written about 1896. And it mentions how the middens of the city, so the midden collectors of the city, back in the 16th century, were given the right to collect the middens from houses and to take those and make money out of them, basically to sell and hustle. And they were the rag collectors, in effect. But this book goes into the detail of how Glasgow at this time really was a circular city. All the waste was taken out of the city and put onto farms or reused in some way. And it was before a time that we had sort of, I suppose, the mass consumption of non-recyclable goods. So it was a really interesting sort of read. But one of the things within that book that it mentions is also the city's responsibility to provide market spaces. And market spaces were seen as really an important way of giving people the opportunity to reuse and recycle. One of those markets that's a very famous market was called Paddy's Market in Glasgow, and Paddy's Market was set up sort of in the mid sort of 19th century, and it really came about when there was the Highland clearances and mass immigration from Ireland because of the potato famine. Lots of people arrived in Glasgow and were living in essentially abject poverty, and they needed a way to make a living. And the markets were a really basic way of people being able to take waste, sell it. And a lot of waste at that time, rag waste, was put into mattresses and pillows and soft furnishings. And it was seen as a way of people being able to make their money and sustain themselves. And the city provided those spaces. Now, sadly, Paddy's Market is no more, because the city, in the lead up to the Commonwealth Games, decided that although people make Glasgow, there's only a certain type of person that makes Glasgow, and Paddy's Market, sadly, was closed in about 2009. But I think the attitude towards the civic communities or the part of the city's role in providing those spaces is really important. And Paddy's Market, to me, as a textile student, was just an amazing place to learn about the history of textiles. I probably spent most of my student loan at Paddy's Markets picking up things for like 50p, but found actually the market atmosphere and the people that were in there selling that goods and hustling every day became my friends, but also were just part of a place in Glasgow that was just really, really alluring to me. And it was a great way of collecting insights into what people were disposing of, and really good examples of just, I suppose, our society and where we were, in that we chose to get rid of all these things, but that these people were finding a way of making money out of it to sustain themselves. Once I'd sort of done my degree in textiles, I then went into fashion and trend prediction for a year. Found it really difficult because it was one of those things I just couldn't reconcile working in an industry that seemed to care very, very little for what it was producing. So I took myself off for a year and ended up, just totally by coincidence, in a place called Raglan in New Zealand, which was on the North Island in New Zealand. And one of the most intriguing things when you first arrived there was this sign, which was the sign for the town and extreme waste. And instantly you thought, well, something up here, something's happening. And what had happened was that a few years before I ended up in Raglan, the community had essentially taken over the waste management for the town, a small rural town of about 3,000 people. And they offered recycling services. They offered, well, now they offer food waste services too, but they also had a shop on site within the town and managed reuse rates, diversion rates of about 76% within sort of less than 10 years. In Argarland Butte, which is where I live now, we can't even get beyond sort of 40% at the moment. So what they did was kind of radical, and it worked really well. And it really interested me in how it was the culture of education and commitment to making this work that the community had was just outstanding. And I think it was something that really profoundly made me think that it is possible to make these things work. When I got back to Glasgow, I started volunteering in charity shops. This is a letter that was written to me by a woman called Jessie Proven, who ran this charity shop in Pollock Shields. It's called the Local Charity Shop. I think it's probably still there. And it claims to be one of the oldest charity shops in Glasgow. And we started off life really as a school uniform exchange. But I volunteered in there with the kind of express purpose of trying to identify a project and trying to think about what I could do as a designer to sort of support the work of charity shops and reuse centres. And I ended up developing a project called Dear Green Place, and a green map. And a green map is basically a map that's made that supports sustainable development within a community. And this was the map, and it wasn't just me that did it. We got a team of volunteers, an illustrator called Frankie Finch, who is still around in Glasgow today. She makes models, and we developed this publication with information in to try and help people raise their awareness of how to make a good donation to a charity shop. Because at the time, a lot of shops were finding that people were not making good quality donations, which then led them to make a loss on sales. So it contained 122 charity shops, and it was the first time that this information had been brought together comprehensively. Keeping in mind this was 2002, so it was just at the sort of cusp of when sort of the Community Recycling Forum was active in Glasgow, and there were things going on, but it was essentially quite a mammoth data collection task. But it was actually a really, really interesting project to lead on. And we used what we knew about the city, and the sort of even the title of the project, Dear Green Place, relates to Glasgow's name, which is in Gaelic, it means green hollow, or it translates as Dear Green Place. So we're trying to use the sort of the local heritage as a way of sort of trying to make this publication accessible and interesting to people. So I moved to Dunoon about 10 years ago now, and for those of you who are not quite sure where Dunoon is, I've just, this map is probably handy. So basically you're in Glasgow and you just keep going west until you hit land again. So you can get on a train in Glasgow, get to Gurrock, and then you get the ferry over to what's called the Cow Peninsula. And Argyll is a huge area. It's about, I think it's the third biggest sort of council region in Scotland. And it is very sparsely populated, although Dunoon is a town of about 10,000 people, and there's a number of other larger towns within this area. This map is a part of an open green map project that I'm involved in. So the green map that I've made in Glasgow, this is the digital version of that system now. And what I started to do was to collate just last year information again on charity shops and reuse projects in the town. And whilst we're doing it, we're collecting information about, you know, the scale of their operations, the type of stuff they were looking to get donations of. And what was really interesting was that not much had really changed in terms of the problems that the charity shops were experiencing. And I suppose really it was quite surprising, given the fact that there's more of an emphasis now on recycling and reuse, and the fact that we have to all pull together to try and divert as many materials from waste. These problems were still happening within charity shops, and they were getting unsuitable donations quite frequently, and there was no real coherent community education campaign around this, which there still isn't now. This is not yet been launched, but we're looking to sort of publish this and circulate that in the next couple of weeks. But importantly, the tools that we're using here are sort of the same green map tools. So it's about trying to get information from people. This is a community campaign tool. So once we've launched the green map, we'll then be looking to get more information from people to try and figure out how to get reuse happening more frequently within this area and crowdsource knowledge from the community. Very much inspired by, I suppose, the stuff that I saw in New Zealand all those years ago. But yeah, that's my talk sort of over for now. I hope you found that interesting.
Right, thank you, Hannah, for sharing that. I didn't actually know where Dunedin was either. Thanks for showing us on the map.
We all know a little bit more then.
Yeah. So now we're just opening up to discussion. We thought a nice way to start, and it's a little bit of a smaller group, so it might be nice to hear from why you're here, if you're here. Sorry, I meant why you're here, and particularly if you're from a rural area, if you would like to say hello, and maybe share any of your experiences and thoughts on either what Hannah's just shared and or the topic, and what drew you in to come along tonight as well. So if someone's brave enough to start. I also realized I didn't introduce myself or Lisa, so I'm Mary, and Lisa's here from SFS as well. So we're the two directors currently. Sorry about that, I'll always forget. But yeah, if someone would like to start, please feel free. Hi, Claire, go for it.
Hi there. So yeah, my name's Claire, and I'm from a startup company I started myself. Had no idea what I was getting involved in, I have to admit, but I've started Prickly Thistle, and I live in a semi-rural area just north of Inverness. So I live in the Black Isle, and our mill is at the moment in Avonton Industrial Estate, super glamorous. But we are surrounded by all sorts of waste transfer stations and British wool growers and all that kind of stuff. So massively inspirational and so relevant to where we are. So so thank you, Mary, for emailing me this afternoon and telling me this was happening, and lovely to say hello to everybody. And thank you, Hannah, for such a brilliant, it's just the paradox of the past being the future is just so ironic. And I think, fair play to you for doing that back then, because I put my hands up and I just didn't have a clue. I was, up until I started this, I consumed. I didn't even think about what I was buying and what I was funding, and just buy new. So I'm converted, but yeah, fantastic what you've done, and such a shame that we're in 2022 and all of these amazing initiatives have always been there, and yeah, commercialism's kept its big foot on top of it all. But yeah, so in terms of the rural stuff, yeah, I just wanted to jump on and say I am from a rural location, and we are a producer of new garments, without a doubt. Everything we make is from wool, but in this journey, I've realised actually it's all about the circular economy piece, and how do we get some of the polyesters out of the whole cradle to cradle side of things. But yeah, so I just wanted to jump on and say hello. I'm in a rural area, and building community is something we definitely want to do more than ever. 2 years of pandemic and kind of keeping your doors closed a little bit. Oh, there's a wee one, hello, down there. So we're really looking to sort of embrace, a much bigger picture around textiles in particular, and we're thinking of doing an anti-landfill label initiative. It's on our website that we've done when we realised, in fact, my mum's partner just passed away, and she's like, I don't know what to do all this clothes. And we're very aware of being as inclusive as we can, and buying ethically is not cheap because it's ethically made. And we're trying to look at an initiative where people can donate all of their clothes to us. Charities are overwhelmed, but we want to make it free so that everybody can just come and help themselves for free. We don't need to generate income off it, but we're not trying to take away revenue either from the charity shops, but we just wanted to create a way of people, in addition to like Salvation Armies, but having something in our area that doesn't exist where people can just come and take it for free. And then maybe we can help them with workshops on how to upcycle it, and also read labels so that they know what a natural fibre is and what is a petrochemical fibre. So hugely inspired by this space. not what I set out to do 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know where I'll be in 4 or 5 years time, but I've just realized that textiles has got a massive role in healing the planet. And yeah, I like to challenge the government and all these things as well, because it's not just what we wear. It's, you know, I've said to Maddie, it's like the NHS sheets, it's, you know, it's the furniture in our home, it's everywhere. So yeah, I just wanted to say a little bit, so I'll be quiet now.
That's really interesting. It's a beautiful place you live in. So up there, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was born in Inverness and studied in Aberdeen. I did super creative chartered accountancy for 7 years, and was a practicing accountant for 13 years. And then, yeah, I for my sins worked in oil and gas sector, and it made me realize I need to do something that is impactful in my life. And yeah, so but yeah, it is lovely up here, I have to say. Thank you. But so where you are as well, Hannah, it's probably not too different.
Thank you for starting us off, Claire, as well. That can be a bit scary. Would anyone else like to say hello or build on anything that's been shared so far? Hi, Emma.
Hi, I could go. Yeah, so I've had a bit of a break from Sustainable Fashion Scotland, just because I've been completing third year at Heriot Watt, and it was just incredibly intense. But I ended up being nominated to work on a competition set by Loro Piana Italian yarn company. I don't know if people are aware of it. And part of that was a trip down to London to look at the shop. And it just made me realise this is just not what I want to do, you know, luxury knitwear design. Obviously, there's always going to be a place for that, but, you know, the wealth, the cost of it all was just incredible, you know. So anyway, it honed my thinking. And so I'm going to go down the social enterprise route for definite. And it will be about textile waste management, looking at trying to make it circular. And I live in a very rural area, Newcastleton, tiny village, 10 miles from the nearest town of Langham, 20 miles to Hoyt, 20 miles to Carlisle. So setting up any business down here is difficult, because if you're just relying on the footfall, it's going to be challenging. But I did really like Hannah's point about that whole thing about jumble sales, not just the bargain that you can get, but that whole community feel, that, you know, that is really lovely. And I love that whole notion of guerrilla gardening and the yarn bombing that you can have. So I'm hoping to maybe try and do things like that down here. And also I'm going to affiliate myself with Borders Women's Aid, support for women fleeing domestic abuse, because I was thinking as a kind of rural enterprise, you know, and a social enterprise, it's an opportunity to kind of co-work. And I think co-working with other enterprises probably is quite a good way of like building up your own resilience, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's me.
You sound busy.
Oh, I am, and I'm knitting, because finally I'll get I've got a chance to knit a friend's jumper, as opposed to doing uni work for Loro Piana. So yeah.
No, it's funny. So you've made a real conscious decision, it sounds like, and yeah. Yeah,
because the design degree, I mean, you could do so much with the design degree, and it was, you know, what the obsequious wealth, you know, and they talked about their very important clients that they are on the phone to, so they don't even hardly have the garments in the shop. They're doing direct sales to all the people that they're, you know, and it was just such, it's not the world I want to be in. But that was the other thing, synthetics. I think that is such a huge challenge. So if we're embarking on textile upcycling, we need to sort out synthetics, because you don't want to be washing a lot of synthetics. Do we actually upcycle synthetics? If we do, how do we do that? Can we identify them? So that's something, that's a bit of a challenge that I might even take into my 4th year at uni, to have a look at that. So any ideas on that would be really welcome.
Claire, do you want to say something? Or you're on mute, that's fine.
Yeah, is it just me? Yeah, no, I think Emma, absolutely. It's one thing that, yeah, I have become, I didn't know that polyester was not just machine washable, highly flammable, was, very much a kind of clear warning, that it was oil. And yeah, it's something that, yeah, what do we do with it? Because 60% of all textiles is, possibly from a petrochemical source, and we have waste colonization in the global south with fires burning for 11 months of the year. And do we want to give this stuff to charity as well, knowing, as you have said, the microplastics, microfibers, the carbon cost of just washing stuff. We never used to wash things, like I'm obsessed with wool because I love it, because you just literally don't need to wash the stuff. You hang it on the line and it's brilliant. And it's it's a really good point, and I'm wanting to take some of these things to Westminster. And I think one thing I've learned is looking at textiles and how it's so circular to other sectors. And in sectors like medical, where from a bacterial perspective, you can see there is some tiny benefit to having some form of petrochemical. But I think it's about taking that and actually, can we keep it out of textiles? That's my really no degree in nothing kind of perspective on it, but can we remove that from the clothing world and the textiles world and take it back to government, basically dump it on their door and say, look, can you deal with this? There is various bacterial enzyme type stuff that's happened in Asia and Europe where they can actually eat plastics and turn it into solution, but can they take that and put that into medical devices? But I think, yeah, it's realizing how damaging it is in textiles, and how do you feel about it ethically, keeping recycling that, and that's yeah, I think that's a challenge. So, for me, it's like saying, well, actually, we need to give this back, like all the plastic masks that everybody wore through the pandemic, there's maybe a place for this, but it shouldn't be on our bodies, and we shouldn't be putting it through our washing machines every day. So take that back, strip that out, that oil, and if you need to, create a life-saving device in a medical situation. But yeah, I think, there's a huge, I feel, the more natural fibers we have coming back through, and then we have much, smaller production of new products, but keeping it clean from plant and animal fiber perspective, then yeah, it's like, I just want to go and dump it all on the government's door and say, yeah, go and deal with that, put a sanction on that.
I was so impressed by Collopsia that we had on a community call, and that they take people's small runs of designed fabrics and make them up into bags and stuff like that, based in Edinburgh, but they then give the waste back to the person who's designed the cloth. I just thought that was genius. So yeah, it's a challenge, isn't it, the synthetics?
It is, yeah, knowing what to do with it, absolutely, because we know it's oil,
Yeah.
and recycling it makes it degrade quicker, the more,
Exactly.
when it's a virgin fiber.
Yeah.
I think there's definite from also, I'm actually wearing a Bernard Klein top, which is probably about 30 years old, if not probably 40 years old, that hasn't degraded. And I think there's a real place for just retaining stuff, and also thinking about the affordability. I think if you make it really easy for people to be able to buy reused items, regardless of what they're made, it means that they use them, and that's better than sort of buying new stuff. And to a lot of people, it's an affordable alternative to fast fashion, and I think but it's creating that link, but it's also making it incredibly easy for people to do. And at the moment, within any context, I still think there's barriers to doing that, and often it's time actually that is a barrier for people. And in rural areas, where there's a lack of access to shops and stuff, and places where this stuff is bought together and to get resold, that's a real barrier. So, and I suspect there's more people in rural places buying online now, and probably buying new actually because it's just accessible to more accessible to do that. So I think there's lots of sort of issues in that, and I think a sort of place-based approach to how we set these things up is really important. I think there's nuances in every place that will make a solution work, but you kind of need to design it at that level, as opposed to it being a sort of strategic big global level or Scotland-wide level even. I think a lot of the problems that I've observed with sort of this area not being particularly great at recycling, it doesn't come from a lack of sort of people who want to do it. It's a lack of connection to making it important and making it culturally important as well, part of our kind of pride, if you like, civic pride. And I think that is probably the same in different places, in different areas of Scotland.
One thing I'd like to ask is, it's, so we live in a rural area and we operate within textiles, and we're learning all of what we're doing, and nothing's truly sustainable. And I know we're creating new things at the moment. How do you, what's been your experiences in terms of galvanizing community? Where you're kind of 2 years of pandemic, there is fear and anxiety over, a whole range of things, but they're sort of in a rural community. It's funny, you can be a very small village, but you can still, feel quite disconnected, and how you kind of bring, disenfranchised people to bring them back. You've had years of maybe people, where we are, a lot of people commute to Inverness and they have friends in other places, and they quite often still don't know the people on their street. And we're part of a small town and a small village. So you think it's small and, oh, that's great, you'll know everyone, but you remember everybody who was your granny's pal more than you remember, who was your pal, because they've all moved on. So one thing is, we're in this little community and everybody kind of knows everyone, but it's galvanizing a bit of community spirit around that, and coming out of where we've been in the last 2 years, which, don't get me wrong, in the beginning, it was like, wow, everybody was just, that March 2020. But how, any sort of recommendations? I've been trying to do things around schools and trying to work through kids, but everybody's so busy.
My solution is jumble sales, obviously. And just because actually just those small things and sort of actually are really simple, and there's nothing. I mean, we do, so a lot of my work at the moment is around developing projects that bring people together through design. So we've got a design of a beach hut project happening at the moment, and we're bringing people together to do workshops, and that's about getting people involved in the regeneration of a space and a place. And I think that's, but in all honesty, I think simple is best, and those kind of events fulfill a need as well, because we've all got stuff. And I think, given your link to textiles, then it's showing kind of appreciation of those things. And I think obviously textiles has a strength as well, that it's a really good access point for craft and for people just starting out and trying to do small things and bringing things together. I think that's just been used again and again and again within communities, whether it be for cultural reasons and bringing people together to share and exchange kind of knowledge of textiles, or to sort of patch things up and mend things. There's lots of different ways of using textiles as a really great inroad to creating community.
No, we have been sort of looking for the first time this summer at doing workshops for free to show people, literally just get a pair of scissors and you can cut it up and it's okay type thing. But it's just, if you had any sort of recommendations on how you sort of galvanize momentum and get people to come along, to do these things, and maybe some stigmas or stereotypes, but but I suppose it's just showing how much fun it can be. And we have car boot sales, but they seem to be, they're not quite, you get traders at car boot sales now. They're not actually, it's become like a mini trade show and some of these things, but it's just not, it doesn't happen, a huge amount here. Maybe it's because we're only sort of 20 minutes from the city. I don't know if it's, we're rural, but not wholly rural.
Odd, do you want to?
Yeah. Hi. I'm Aude Le Guenec. I'm a research fellow in future heritage at Glasgow School of Art. Just joining Glasgow School of Art, coming from the School of Textiles and Design. So I'm still in Galashiels. Hi, Emma.
Hi.
And I'm glad to see you and to hear about the development of your project. It's really exciting. So at the School of Textiles and Design in Gala, I was the Director of Fashion Studies, and then I was academic lead for public engagement, and in between design anthropologist. So I've developed a lot. So I'm indirectly interested in your project in Sustainable Fashion Scotland, and and directly interested in what you're saying today. So yeah, I think, well, I'm particularly interested at the moment in children's education to sustainable fashion. I think that we need to start at a young age, and I come from my research into children's fashion as well, children clothing as a socializing tool. I have studied, and I am working on a research on children school clothes as well. So I've been through a lot of ideas regarding how we could use clothing as an educational tool, how we could foster children's understanding of clothing, fashion, how this works, how this makes them, you know, belong to a certain community, developing their own identity. And I think, well, I don't know if some of you know Maya Nigren. She's based in Edinburgh, and she's developed Alma Borealis. So she's one of your peers, Emma. Maya has been doing a lot of workshops with children where she has encouraged them to experiment all sorts of techniques, and during lockdown, using whatever they could have around them to learn how to knit, how to create new garments, etc. And she's been doing a fantastic job. So I'm still working with her with designing for children's rights as well. And we are trying to really focus on clothing as part of children's education, as part of the curriculum in Scotland, which is really focused on children's rights, on learning through play. So if you learn through play, why don't you learn through fashion and clothing? And then as an adult, this might help the awareness for a more sustainable consumerism and a more engaged approach of fashion as well. So I think, Claire, and I would love working with you, because now I'm in Forest. So I'm going to have to do a lot of project there. I'm going to come and visit you soon. So it would be fantastic to think about ways for children to have a more aware, a better awareness about what they're wearing, how they're wearing, and why they're wearing what they are wearing. And this might, at a short term, this might shape the approach, the consumerism approach and the consumer behavior of the younger generations. I think that, yeah, I believe that this might be super helpful. And also learning again the techniques of mending, of doing stuff with your hands from a very young age, and stuff that can be useful as well for the creation of your clothes, basically. With regard to what I'm doing, and sorry, I'm going to shut up after, what I'm doing at Glasgow School of Art, I'm the program lead for Future Heritage. So we are not going to look solely into fashion and clothing and textiles, but more widely into the tangible and intangible heritage, and how we can create a better future and a more creative future if we're looking at our heritage with a variety of perspectives. So any idea and any partnership, welcome. We are developing it just now, so it's going to be up and running in September. So it's really in development at the moment.
Thank you for sharing and saying hello. It's nice to meet you as well. Hannah, were you what's that your?
Yeah, I was going to say, so I don't know so I'm a graduate of the innovation school that was up in Forres, so a lot of my stuff is linked to heritage actually, and subsequently since leaving. But I think with textiles, it'd be really nice to see sort of a widening out maybe of what we mean by heritage and textiles, because I think there's a sort of focus obviously on sort of traditional industries and stuff, but we've also got a brilliant print industry that was I'm a big fan. So the area I live in, Cow, was where Robert Stewart lived, who was a leading designer in sort of post-war, who went on to actually head up the art school. But he actually lived on the Cow Peninsula and travelled into work by his car, then boat, then train, leaving his family of like 6 kids and his poor wife every day to go and be at the art school. And he's associated with the art school, but a lot of his work and a lot of his really interesting practice happened in a rural area. And that link between design and context, and that association that design has with an urban space as opposed to a sort of rural space, I think is actually something that I'm really interested in, because I don't think there's enough discussion about designers living and occupying rural spaces, and what that means for communities as well, and how usefully they can be sort of tapped into to do different things. Because if you live in a rural area, you're not necessarily getting loads of work, but actually looking at how you can develop work with people and do stuff that's a bit more wide ranging can really help, I think. So heritage is something that I think touches on my practice, but it would be really interesting to see how across Scotland textile heritage could be used, because I'm sure there's nuances to this in different areas.
Right. Emma, do you want to? I feel like you might have something really relevant to say to that as well.
Hi. Yeah, just listening to everyone. Sorry, I've been squirreling away. I've got an event this weekend with my business, Rose's Wardrobe, so I'm like sewing buttons onto card and things like that. So I have been listening, but just busy with my hands. So yeah, listening to everyone is really interesting. So I've got a business that I set up with my wife in 2019 called Rose's Wardrobe. We recreate vintage inspired fashions using mostly vintage wools from local textile mills in Langham. I'm just down the road from other Emma, and down the road from Gala and Hoyk and all that as well. So and it's Langham's always had quite a rich textile heritage at the height of its at its heyday. It had 15 mills, all weaving really amazing quality tweeds and woolen fabrics. Sadly now there's all but one still working, and we have the great pleasure of having our studio inside that mill, which is really exciting, to see the fabrics coming off the looms for massive designers, and they're so blasé about it, like, oh yeah, that's for Chanel. And you're like, wow. But in relation to what everyone's saying, it's just really interesting. And Holly, sorry, my dogs, they want them to join in. So in November last year, me and my wife set up a community interest company called Creation Mill, and that is basically training and workshops all around everything textiles, basically. It kind of came about from a few things, doing workshops with the Langham Initiative and their Textile Estill project, which actually came to an end in March. And then also working in the mill and seeing all the beautiful fabrics being produced, but their struggle for seeing new people coming into the workspace. So we're based inside the darning room. So there's only one full-time darner and 3 part-time darners, and the work just piles up. There's always bales of fabric ready to be darned, and I think there's like five weavers and a couple of people that do like the winding of the cones and things like that. So it's a really small team, but they're getting so busy, and try to do some advertisement for jobs like apprenticeships and stuff, and not really had any interest. But with Creation Mill, what we're trying to do is doing baseline introduction to textiles in all, like everything textiles, because at the back of the mill there's a yarn dyer. So the yarn gets dyed at the back of the mill. It gets woven in our space. It gets shipped up to Gala Shields at Schofields to get finished, and then comes back to Langham and gets made into products in Langham. So it's actually quite a small area to. It's quite low carbon footprint, I like to think. But yeah, so it's going to Creation Mills, sorry, I feel like I'm jumping about a bit. Creation Mills going to have a few arms. So one of it's like dedicated training for young people or people who want to have a career change. And then for enjoyment workshops, which we have running at the moment. And they're paid workshops in like weaving and needle felting and sewing and all things like that. But the heritage really really interests me because the darners, the full-time darners, 2 years off retirement, and there's no one coming in and learning that skill, and that skill's never going to be replaced by a machine. It's always going to be a human. You see June, you just see her hands like gliding over this fabric, and it's mesmerizing to watch her. She's just so much talent. And they don't even think they're talented, it's just their job. They're just but so yeah, educating young people to come in and have a look at different aspects of the textile industry, also talking about how their job could be a more modern, multifaceted job rather than sitting at a table and darning for 8 hours, which to me sounds boring, let alone a young person whose mind is more young and new. So just thinking of how they could practice the skill of darning that needs to be kept on, but also helping with the social media or marketing and account managing and giving a more of a multifaceted job role to these young people coming into the workplace.
I was going to say, I think that's really important to have that. I think a lot of rural areas in particular struggle to retain people. I mean, certainly where I am, that's the big challenge. And obviously what you're setting up is trying to sort of reconcile some of that.
Yeah, well, actually with Rose's Wardrobe, we put out a job advertisement for a brand, just a brand admin role part-time, and we actually caught Anna. We say we caught her because she just moved to Langham with her parents as a stopgap between graduating from Gala, Heriot Watt, and then onto her next journey, which could have taken her anywhere. But she saw our job role pop up and applied for it, and she got it. And now we've got her. We've kept her in Langham, and she's got a boyfriend and everything now, so it's all great. She's not going anywhere. But she could have quite easily have looked at Langham and go, oh, there's not really anything for me here, especially after coming from doing a design degree. But having small micro businesses in Langham and having that advertisement of what actually is going on locally. And from our job, she's set up a website for Drove Weavers. So Drove Weavers is the mill that we work in, and they had no internet presence whatsoever. Like if you typed it in Google, I think one of our blog posts came up because we mentioned that we'd moved in there, and that was it. No phone number, nowhere, nothing. But it was all, they get work on like word of mouth and things, so they never really relied on the internet. But Anna set them up a website and a Facebook and an Instagram and things like that, and just trying to tell the story of Drove Weavers a bit more and letting people know how great they are.
Are they featured on Make Works, Langham Mill?
Make Works? No, I don't.
I'll put in the chat a link to, it's like a catalogue, it's like a Scotland-wide, or actually it's wider than that, of makers and producers, and to connect industry to people wanting bespoke stuff.
Yeah,
really worth knowing about.
They do. Sorry, my dog's annoying me. What's the matter? Come here. Because at the moment they're commission-based weavers, so they get commissions from other mills like Linton Tweeds in Carlisle, that do a lot for Chanel, and Linton Tweeds obviously weave some themselves, but when they're super busy they outsource to Drove Weavers. But they are trying to change to not be just commission weavers, and actually talk directly to customers and getting new contacts and things like that. So yeah, being on a platform like that, especially now that we've got the website set up for them, and the Instagram and things like that. So it might be a good thing for them to do.
I just wondered, am I okay, Mari, to go? Yeah, no, hi, an odd, can I just, one with the children's piece, maybe we can connect, because I've been trying to do something at secondary level with my daughter's secondary school called United by Uniform, but it's around recycling school clothing, but not just swapping garments. It's about showing how kids can take their school uniform apart and actually reconstruct new again, that skills they can take then and become more repair shop like in their own wardrobe. But it's trying to do that around school uniform, making it cool so their tie might be on the arm. But it'd be great to catch up, because I've never thought about it at a much younger level. But there's an idea around United by Uniform. I just wanted to say that to Odd. Emma, yeah, I just wanted to say, so I know Robbie at Drove, and the team, the Lion, Robbie. So Robbie was very supportive of what we were doing in the beginning. So we weave still on old shuttle looms. The looms that we rescued effectively came from Selkirk. So there's one that's nearly 100 years old.
Wow.
So Robbie talks about all his girls. This is the old looms, and he knows we've got the old looms, which are, you know, the shuttle ones as opposed to the modern rapier looms. And I know there was a really great opportunity coming out of the pandemic with Lochcarron, where Robbie took it back, you know, so that they could have this MBO and retain ownership of it. Yeah. But I've spoken to, so before I started, and we did crowdfunding to build our mill and bring back a mill to the Highland region. So we're the only mill in this region. Hunters of Brora was a huge mill at one point, you know, very much on par with Johnson's, but it closed for the final time about 30 years ago, you know, despite HRH stepping in several times. But so we took to crowdfunding to bring back the weaving. So when we started, there was only one person who even knew how to switch them on. Wow. But we've got 15 people now, and we've got 6 of us who can all operate these looms and do the warping by hand, sectional warping, using the old style looms, and also doing zero waste design in terms of garment manufacturing. But one thing we find, and I speak to a few weavers, because I know, you know, Robin Elliott is, you know, along at Selkirk. I know Colin Brown from Anthony Haynes in Golfbuchan. You know, I know Simon Cotton, ex Johnson's of Elgin, certainly, and even going out to John Glenn and Butte and things. And Robin does talk to me about, you know, it's really difficult to get the next generation and the borders in particular to come back into the textile space. And there is a stigma and stereotype potentially associated with it, you know, and I know that Robin really struggles. You know, I think his youngest employee is 82. You know, that's the youngest that he's got working with them. And he's old Dobcross looms as well. So these skills are so important, because I think it's, you know, seeing the seismic shift in terms of, you know, a crazy industry 4.0 and automating everything, and then building social equity where we're actually creating more jobs for humans than machines again, but giving them a quality of living and job satisfaction that they are useful. They're not just playing to the fiddle of a machine. Unlike the Burberry mill in Keighley, where, you know, you've got traffic lights above a loom and an engineer's got 4 minutes to turn that light from red to green again, and a NASA space center. I mean, that's what their mill's like. It's horrendous. You know, there's about 4 guys to 30 looms, and everything's automated and computerized, and they've literally just got to go around and just get that red light off within 4 minutes to get the, you know, the warp tied back in or something like that. But one thing so there is, you know, in terms of recruiting, really hard, but, you know, I haven't spoken to Robbie for ages. He used to give a few bits of technical advice to us, even diagnosed, you know, flying shuttles over the phone. Don't know how he did it, but everything he said was bang on, and our shuttle stopped flying and twisting in the sleigh. Yeah. But for us, you know, we've got people here who have never done textiles ever. And it was just really that we were kind of looking for that passionate individual that really cared about making things in a kind way. You know, it wasn't slow manufacturing per se or anything like that. So we've been really lucky. We've got people in 20s right through to the 70s. I have to confess, I've missed this bit out, but we managed to find somebody who worked in Hunters of Brora and stayed in Brora, who was a Belfast weaver from the age of 16. So he did Irish linen, but he stayed and he shared all of our skills with us. But the one thing that we kind of said that's a real struggle, and I was talking about this with Mari the other day, is that, you know, and it'll be the same with Robbie at Drove, and I was at the Scottish Tartan Authority AGM today as well, which I'm a trustee for. And I think on the marketing awareness piece is that people all over the world being able to connect with paying fair prices for things when they're made in this kind of way, because these next generation kids absolutely should not be getting more money stacking shelves than, you know, weaving a beautiful cloth. And that's the real struggle. And I, you know, and I can see from my background, as I say, not very creative and accountant, but I get the whole struggles of how some of these mills just can't afford to pay, you know, great wages. And that's really, really, you know, so they're up against this huge market challenge because they'll get more working in KFC or a drive-through, or, as I say, you know, a night shift in Tesco's. But it is one of my struggles is actually, how do we get people to reconnect with fair, ethical pricing of something that's made as close to home as possible? Because we've got such a big, you know, where there's the reuse and recycle, and there's fast fashion, and there's the premium luxury side, which, as Emma was talking about, you know, it's obscene. Just because it's super expensive doesn't make it ethical, you know, quite often far from it. So it's trying to say, getting the next generation is about giving them good wages, it's about giving them the training support so that they see the passion and the sense of pride that comes from making things again. But it's a difficult one for a business, and we face that challenge, is that actually you need to make the ends meet. You want to pay fairer wages, you want to give flexible working, you want to, you know, create a fun environment. No, this is not a mill where you're like the guys in Burberry 4 minutes to get the loom back on. But it's about it's the supply and demand, and it's the demand of the consumer and the awareness of the consumer to say, actually, I completely value this, and of course I'm not going to question the price of that. And that's a challenge we have in terms of getting people to reconnect with the making of these things in the very beginning. So actually, that is £100. It's not £20. But now I know why. The buy less, love more comes in, and then we kind of start to solve some other problems. So yeah, so that's still that's still a real problem that I find now. But there is young kids out there, but they do want to be paid, you know, fair wages. And I think, but by all means, say to Robbie that you spoke to me. You called me that the lass in the Highlands. Tell him to reach out to him. We were always going to try and meet up. We only opened our mill in 2018, and then a couple of years in pandemic came. So there is people there, and I can help and share what we've learned in terms of attracting people and getting them in and getting them really motivated. But they deserve to be paid well. But that's something I'm struggling with, you know, to get people to say we can't, you know, deal with climate change and just keep buying cheap crap, sorry my French, you know, but we can't keep giving the money to the unethical brands. Anyway, that's me. But do reach out to me, Emma.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you about the pricing thing. Like seeing these luxury brands get their fabrics woven in Drove weavers, and they're already, so Linton Tweed does the Chanel ones, so Chanel's ordering the fabric from Linton Tweeds, and then Linton Tweeds is outsourcing it to Drove weavers. So their Drove weavers are then Linton's going to make a profit on what they do for Drove weavers, and then Chanel's going to make a profit on what, and it only seems like that the fabric is valued once it's made into something.
Giving credit to the makers.
So then the fabric gets made into a Chanel jacket, and that's when it gets whacked like thousands of pounds. But the jacket wouldn't exist without the fabric and the fibers. And we've been working with a lady, and she's got quite a few sheep, and she gets 12 pence a fleece. And it's just heartbreaking. So she's looking at other ways now of how she could use her fleece herself instead of it's not worth it for that sort of price. But it really bugbears me that's how it is, and the system's broken, and like you say, we need to put that fair price on the fabric and the quality and the craftsmanship that goes into it. Like Drove weavers, like I don't blame them at all, because like you say, it's tight for everyone, but they expect people to come in, young people to come in on an apprentice wage at like £4 whatever it is. My daughter's 14 and just got a job at the hotel for £5 an hour. So that's even higher than an apprentice wage. And you're supposed to be an apprentice for what, 2 years or 3 years? And like you say, they can go and stack shelves in our stuff for £9.50 an hour. So it's just, and even the darners, like I know they're not on much more than minimum wage, and that they've been darning and got years and years of experience, but it's like they're not valued for that.
And it is, and I think no, absolutely, and I think it is, you know, they want to, and they're under this huge commercial squeeze and pressure when they work through a supply chain, but it's that's one thing I've become super passionate about, not just for what we're doing as a business, but all of these lovely weavers. 7 in 10 people in Scotland used to be in textiles. It was our thing. And it's about really raising awareness from our domestic markets, that actually, we buy so little that's made on our doorstep, but yet we talk about supporting local, and it's really getting people to reconnect with that. And yes, it's an investment to begin with, but when you buy less and love more, your cost per wear, all of a sudden you're saving money. But it's a huge challenge because we've become so used to just, we can just buy. And that makes it massively challenging to get the next generation. But we get to the stage where we just don't have those skills anymore. And, when it's really, it's fully automated. But yeah, I mean, as I say, we're kind of trying to make it work. It's not perfect, and it is a bit of a struggle what we're doing, trying to, consumer awareness. But I'd be more than happy to share our learnings and how we've kind of overcome certain things, and we've only been going on for 4 years. But I know I've kind of tried to bite the bullet and pay, above the living wage to get people here. But it's difficult because then you're sitting there going, oh my God, how am I going to pay the wages type thing. But it was, but it's tough, and you just think ethical businesses might just resonate more with just people who are spending the money. But do reach out to me, and I can share anything we've done on brand elevation, marketing, all that kind of stuff, contacts, whatever.
Thank you. It's nice to see people connecting as well on these calls. I'm just gonna, because it's 8:30, I'm very happy to stay on for another 20-25 minutes, because I feel like and I see Corinne, you've got your hand up as well, so it'll be nice to hear from you. But just if anyone does need to go, because it's 8:30, thank you so much for coming, and we will be sending an email over the weekend / early next week with links and resources as well. And I'm sure if you want to reach out with anyone that's here and you don't have their contact details, just get in touch with us and we can put you in touch together as well. But as I said, I think, Hannah, are you okay to stay a bit longer, or do you need to go as well? Cool. Yeah, that's fine. We'll stay on for 20-25 minutes. But yeah, if you do need to go now, thank you so much. And Corinne, do you want to say hello? Oh, yeah. We also have a feedback form. Sorry, I forgot. Lisa's just shared it in the chat, but I'll share that again. And that'll also be in the email next week. Yeah, on you go, Corinne.
I'm sitting here kind of like in agreement with everything that's getting said, and I feel like I've got things that I could add to everything. But what I was going to say there was I was involved in the initial setup of Future Textiles at Dumfries House, which HRH saved and set up, and that was kind of set up initially because the local industry in Ayrshire were looking for like darners and knit machine operators and the kind of lace making. And that's what I found when we went and we did the visits to these places, that the wages were so poor. You would not be promoting that as a kind of place to go and work. But quite recently, I work in Glasgow College in the textiles department, so quite recently within this year we've had a lot of the second years out in work placements. And another thing I found is that it's like small businesses are expecting these students to just be working for free on an internship, but they're on these internships for like 3 and 4 months, and they're not paid anything. They're having to pay their own travel, their own lunch. And I just think the payment system within the industry is really broken at all levels, like from very small businesses to these kind of bigger companies that have been established for a long time. And I think that's one of the things recently that I've had a lot of conversations with students, that they've just said, yes, I would love to go and work in a kind of heritage place like that, but I just simply cannot afford to live on such a rubbish wage. So I think that is a real issue. And certainly that's what I noticed when I was helping to set up Future Textiles, that I thought there's no really, I don't know, it's the resources and the helps kind of needed for the infrastructure to get the kind of the living wage standard and just a better life work balance wage in these type of places.
No, I think it's a huge issue though, because I think if Scotland wants that industry, it's obviously really important. But I think particularly again about retention in rural areas and stuff, it's really important as well. And I wonder though if there is this is a kind of campaign, because essentially we're talking about the same things that we're talking about when we're talking about importing textiles and fast fashion and the slavery that goes on there. And actually, we're not we're not at that level, but there's certainly a lack of recognition that a lot of design is for free. You know, like a lot of people aren't prepared to pay for stuff. And I think that is about a culture that doesn't value certain things, but changing that is potentially a national campaign, and it is something that has to go beyond, I suppose, all of us. It is about, this is the true cost. It's the same discussion they're having in agriculture about farming prices and food prices. It's exactly the same thing, is that we have to pay real money if we want a local production, because people are expensive, you know, and that's, we've devalued that down to the to the nth degree now. And I think that's kind of a real sort of reconciliation, and that has to come through. I kind of think that has to come through policy, though, you know, like it has to come through a much bigger force and a more definitive force, although, you know, obviously that needs to be campaigned for. So that's a really important point, I think.
We'll add that to the to-do list. And
it's down to you then next week. Yeah.
But no, definitely is something that collective action, a group of people could definitely make the noise around that. So we will note that down and see if we can, or if any of you would like to as well, then go for it. Yeah, vote well as well. That's right. Emma or Claire, did one of you want to add to that?
Am I okay? I'll be quick, Emma. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, yeah, totally. I think there is a national policy requirement there, and it's just everything. Yeah, it's food, it's, you know, it's anything that we consume. You know, it's that don't know, don't buy principle. But the one thing I've learned a little bit, and I think with maybe opening our doors, is, you know, there is the kind of two ends to this. You know, there's the government policy infrastructure change, or just the general awareness. You know, we have Zero Waste Scotland, for example, these types of organisations to do more around promoting ethical living. But there is one thing that I've learned, there is still hope within the world of, you know, it's not education around consumers at all, it's just remembering. And I think, you know, so many people just don't know. So we find that when we start to show people what's involved in our mill, you know, and what's happening at Robbie's mill or any traditional Dumfries, people all of a sudden go, I had no idea this is what was involved. I had no idea this took 3 days, you know, and then they actually start to, you know, they can make the decision for themselves without needing the policy. It's just they've never seen it so much because there's so little of it happening in the country. And I think it's just how, we know, with Sustainable Fashion Scotland and within rural communities, how we open our doors and to these things, so that people quite often work it out for themselves. Because like, if that's taken 5 hours and I know I want to be paid £10 an hour plus taxes and plus pension, then, you know, that's £100 right there before we even, you know, look at the material. But it's, you know, it's the policy. But that's what we're trying to do. Is one is, yes, going to Westminster and rattling Ian Blackford and all these kinds of ones, but also just encouraging people to learn again that this actually, there's a lot of work involved. You know, you don't just see it hanging on a hanger and that's it. So yeah, so we find that, you know, giving people the chance to reconnect with it is also really useful, because they can help influence government too, I think.
You said an interesting thing about open doors, and it reminds me of, you know, the heritage sector do Open Doors Day. And yeah, I actually think it's because it's process. It's like watching stuff being made is so alluring to people. And
absolutely,
you know, that's something that I think maybe the textile industry needs to learn from, actually exposing that process, you know, within print, within everything. And because it's a heavily labor intensive and process, regardless of how many machines you sometimes have access to. People.
We Elliott's did open their doors in Selkirk, the mill, because I went and visited, and it was it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Maybe we could do an Open Doors Day. I've not heard of that, but yeah, across the country, everyone could do it.
I think
all the rural areas as well.
Yeah, I mean, the national trusts do it with properties, don't they? They have a national trust.
So there's a national Open Doors, so it's coordinated events, usually in September, actually. So you can, and it does all. So in terms of piggybacking on a heritage event, then it's organised in different areas on slightly different dates, but it's generally free. It's free to be part of. It gets promoted through a variety of channels. So it's a good thing to be sort of aware of if you have the capacity to open your doors and let people through, as it were, but you have to be able to obviously supervise that.
Yeah, we just showed two organisations around just in connection to Creation Mill, one yesterday morning and one this morning, and I just love opening the doors to the mill, because I feel like saying to them, just to let you know, you are going to be impressed, because as soon as you walk in, there's the clatter of the looms and everyone just goes, oh my god, and you can't really hear it from outside. It's really the walls are obviously massively thick, so it's really you can't hear when you're approaching, but as soon as you get inside, it's when quite a lot of them are going, it's quite powerful. But just with what you were saying about internships, I did a couple of them in London, and luckily had support from my family, but yeah, nothing was paid, not even travel, not even lunch. And I think when we've been asked by a couple of people to do internships and not been at the point where we can support that internships, we've had to say unfortunately no, because I think from me doing them, and that you need to feel valued in a job to be able to, and it's hard because obviously as a small business, if someone's offering to do work for free, then you're like, yeah, great, but it's that like we're then talking about sustainability and ethics, but then we're not paying someone for doing some work, and it doesn't really work for the business that we're trying
to work. I mean, when I was a student, I did loads of work placements in London, and I did an internship in Amsterdam, which wasn't paid and things, but I mean, it was an amazing experience. And you can do it for a week or a couple of weeks, but it's like, it's lengthy periods of time now, and it just seems like they're getting taken advantage of. It's like they're actually doing a lot of good work for these places, and it's just kind of taking the mick now at this point. But I think it's kind of just expected in the design industry. I think like years ago, we would always just say to the students, yeah, well, that's just what happens. But actually now it's a bit more like, no, people are not standing for it happening in other countries. Why should you be standing for it happening here? Why should you be kind of fueling that to keep happening in the future? So I've been kind of a bit like, right, you can do it for a couple of weeks and then say, no, I need this, or at least pay my travel or whatever, because some of these places are quite far out. They're maybe like £10-14 a day in their travel, so it's, and they're not always gaining a lot back from the business either, so it doesn't even feel a kind of fair exchange that way. So yeah, that's something I think we need to kind of,
and that's another challenge with coming back to the rural thing, is like you want to get people to come and see what's happening in this rural place, but then not having a support system to be able to support them to come and try on the bus, like, because Langham's quite a weird, like, we're situated quite close to Carlisle and Cumbria border, and then just up, so 30 minutes down is Carlisle, 30 minutes up is Hoyk, which is Scottish borders, and then Dumfries is like 50 minutes across, so we're kind of in a bit of a triangle. So, and bus routes and things aren't very good, and there's no train link or anything like that, so to try and get people to out with Langham to come in and see what Langham's doing is quite difficult in that aspect as well.
I mean, it sounds to me though that as a kind of that actually it's playing on that, isn't it, to the strengths, and creating sort of internships and stuff that are part of a support structure. And then maybe it does come with accommodation. It does come, because I think dumping people in rural places can also be really miserable for people. And I'm acutely aware of not paying people also means that kids or young people from disadvantaged backgrounds don't even get, like, can't even contemplate this stuff. So there, I mean, in many ways, it seems like putting in place, sort of solutions to that is about funding apprenticeships and work experience, and it is also potentially about funding accommodation, and it is about creating that support around it. But when I see the millions that have been spent in rural areas on tourism, I'm like, well, like this is industry, because so much of the economy in this area, there's such a focus on tourism, but there's very little sort of drive to do things out with that. And I think design can feed into tourism, but it needs to be in its own right, and making a manufacturer, they need to be in their own right, fighting for that, for some of that money that goes into those other industries that are very precarious by their nature as well, but seem to get the backing and are very organised in their fight to get that backing as well. So I think it is about, in terms of networks, going back to the subject matter, I think these are the sorts of things that I think connect into how you build networks and strength within sort of these areas. It's those solutions to how you get people working in those spaces is so important, and fighting for that bit of money to make that possible, I think, is really important.
I think if I can just add there, absolutely, Hannah, and I think it is quite sad to see how much funding there is going on so many different things. But just speaking a little bit from the experience, one example is we've even had the developing young workforce officers in our area who are part of this United by Uniform initiative we're doing for free to try and get our Fort Rose Academy to really tackle the call to action every school year to go and shop in Primark for black trousers that they all do. We've even had them approach us and go, this is my friend has a daughter who's looking for apprenticeship. So we pay the living wage, but we're absolutely, it's a balancing act to pay fair wages, but sell enough to exist. Having gone through the houses, and I say I've worked for companies in the past who will get money for anything, and they've got millions in the bank. They'll get grants for broadband, but they've got millions in the bank. Highlands, poster boy companies, poster girl companies, gone through hoops with Skills Development Scotland, where they pay consultants to do reports, and actually they should have just given the money to the business in the first place. Tell me how to interview somebody. Thank you very much. That costs £3,000. But what I find really frustrating in the textiles world or industry, having worked in others, is actually there is a real stigma attached to it within Scotland, and some of these, there's a kind of, it's not a serious, it's you're part of the sexy tech side of things. It's about health science, it's about innovation, it's about renewable sectors, and it's always been, I don't quite understand how it's being not valued and not supported as well. You have Scottish Textile Skills Partnership that used to be there. You had Textile Scotland that used to be there. It's now part of UKFT. And I think it's really, really hard for businesses, ourselves included, to create. I think we could have 20 people come and work here, and I would love to do it. But it's just, how do you have society value and support that, and change their consumption habits, spend the same money every year, but really think about ethical investments. But then how do you get these governments and all of these organizations that are so disconnected to anything other than a public role that's all about spending money to a budget? They don't get, that you have to make ends meet. It's super challenging. And I do feel sorry for so many people involved in the arts and crafts and textiles space, because it never gets, the credit that it deserves. And I think it's such an essential next to food. So yes, I've banged my head off the wall, I don't know how many times, 4 or 5 years, to go around the houses with all of these people. And it's when you're a small company, you don't have that time, because you can be hands-on operational yourself. You're carrying the slack, you're weaving at night, you're doing, fulfilling orders, you're free. So you're doing that. And so it's painful to watch that actually there could be a hugely thriving aspect to every community that's hugely rewarding, and it's just not getting the credit it deserves. It's still something I've not been able to crack the code on. But yeah, it's but collective, what Mary and where's the other girl gone? Is she away? Oh no, there she is, Lisa. All of these organizations and galvanizing, and being a bigger voice. But it's, it is frustrating knowing how much money gets spent on all sorts of things. For example, New York Tartan Week there, I would say they spent at least £500,000 on a Visit Scotland campaign and having adverts in the back of yellow cab taxis. Pointless. These guys are coming to see the castles anyway. They've done ancestry.com. You don't need to show them a film called Scotland is Calling. It's just, it's pointless. So, but think how many apprenticeships that would have created in really sectors that need to be. So it's tough. I'm not saying it's doom and gloom, but it's, how do you get, the voices together and say, you need to change. Anyway, that's my bit. I'll do my bit in Westminster if I can in a couple of weeks.
When are you going to Westminster?
Sorry?
When are you going to Westminster?
On the 12th of May. So I'm meeting 2 politicians. I'm meeting Ian Blackford and I'm meeting another politician as well to go and just talk about climate change and talk about textiles and talk about, you know, B Corps in particular, because we're the only B Corp mill in the whole of the UK, which is amazing. But, you know, as a framework for actually how does, and it's not just textiles, it's every business. I get really frustrated about who they support in every sector, and really need to have a far more ethical framework to understand who is worthy of support. If somebody is operating unethically, why are we using taxpayers' money to fund them? It's just, you know, it's just not good enough. So it's about taking that to Ian, maybe trying to sell him a "I'll make you look good" story so that he actually does something about it. But yeah, so I'm going down there to talk about a few things with them. That's not just textiles. It's just, you know, it's just good economic, you know, morals, looking after people. So yeah, so I'll go down in a couple of weeks.
I just as a couple of points. There's a call out for students to do a questionnaire for the Scottish Government on, are you concerned about your money through the summer holiday? And you know, I'll do it, and I'll just see what it's about, because if the government could fund student placements through the holidays, wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah.
And the other point was, I just wanted to raise the Circular Community Scotland, if anyone has got any experience of that, because they're looking at a share and repair network, and it was just raising that just to see what people's experiences were of that, really.
So this, it used to be Community Recycling Network Scotland, didn't it? Yeah.
And they employed somebody recently as a project lead for creating a Scottish-wide network, I think.
So potentially that's a good opportunity for textile mills and these places that maybe have spaces that could offer something of that, because there's bits of funding knocking around for those in different areas so they're looking at a whole range of things. But yeah, I mean, from tool libraries, which don't probably make very much money, but you know, things like hosting repair shops in rural areas, it might be that there's a solution that comes from those discussions. I mean, I know it's probably focused on furniture and other things, but you know, it's interesting that textiles could be a theme. It's probably worth being put in part of that discussion if you're looking at being a enterprise as well.
And watch that space. Yeah, great.
I just wanted to jump in with a few points, if you don't mind. So first of all, Langholm initiative, that's fantastic what Judith has been doing there. I was really more than sorry when I heard that some of this work had to be called to an end because
Judith's on our board. Judith's on Creation Mill's board.
Cool. Okay, excellent.
Grabbed her back.
Yeah, cool. That's cool. I mean, that's just amazing. I went to Langholm and I couldn't believe how rich this was over there, and how interesting the connections between, you know, the luxury companies working for luxury and donors and all that were working together. Very good experience, and I really recommend that. No, I just wanted to flag up something. So it's important to remember that the Heritage and Museum Network can be helpful to support the transmission of skills, to value the work that is being done within this industry. I come from a background in a textile museum in France. I was a director of a textile museum in Cholet, which is well known for his textile heritage there. And the museum there was an incubator for A, the conservation of skills, B, the transmission of skills. And we had an in-house workshop where we were continuing the production of the handkerchiefs, but also experimenting something else. So I think that working hand in hand with the museum and heritage sector could be also a way forward to work at the development of a confidence for this sector, and also reflect about what's happening in the sector in tourism, which is, as you said, very well funded. So I think that that's a first point I wanted to make. The second one, also, sorry, coming from my French and European background, we have the European Heritage Day, as you know, in September, and as you have mentioned. And we also have the European Day for the Métiers d'Art. Yeah. So I think that connecting Scotland to these European days could help having a better vision of what is happening in this country, in this nation, in terms of textile industry, and in terms of, you know, the strength of this industry and the specificity of this industry. So you could at some point have more visibility if the sector was connected to this kind of European actions, even though we are not in Europe anymore. And that might be a point for Westminster, you see, Claire. So because they are doing a lot at the moment in terms of funding, research funding, to support crafts and the transmission of skills. And the last point, and sorry, yeah, just 1 minute. In Brittany, I'm Breton, in the 1980s, we created something which was called produit en Bretagne, you know, made in Brittany. And this helped in the 1980s to rebuild the confidence of this region, which was very much laughed at and totally diminished and totally, you know, raining all the day, nobody was working there, rural area, don't care. But so they've been lobbying a lot, they've created Produit en Bretagne, and they have gained more confidence, and this has helped them to claim their pride, their pride for what they were doing, how they were living, and what was made there, and to attract funding and to attract the industry as well. So maybe that's an idea as well, and I'm sure that the industry is doing that. I'm sure that you guys are super active on this point, but maybe to make it more visible to the public and customers. So that's the points I wanted to make.
Thank you very much for sharing those odds as well. I just shared a link in the chat. Oh, I also really like the kind of piggybacking on other events idea to gain more visibility, because I think that's a really good way to reach new audiences, which is quite important for the awareness and getting outside of the echo chamber. So yeah, I really love that idea. Hannah, do you want to jump in with your comment there? I was just about to wrap up, if you want to add some last thoughts as well. Or also quickly, I just put a link in the chat to another funding thing. I don't know if you've seen them all already, but it's called CircOx, or I think Circle AX, something like that. But it's kind of like a European thing, but you can come from the UK as well and partner with someone in another country, I think. But someone from our network received the funding successfully from it, and focusing on circular design. It's focusing on textiles, sorry. So there maybe is potential there. You know, about the heritage and bringing back the skills to actually fund apprenticeships and that kind of thing. So that might be worth looking into, or a collaborative effort as well. So if anyone's interested in that, feel free to email us as well. Might wrap up there since it's 9 p.m. I feel like maybe we can have another call, or I feel like we've got a wee working group here of like rural and, you know, heritage. So maybe we can set something like that up in future as well, because it's been a really good conversation. Lots of different points that we can go and collate, and we'll try and pull out some key insights to share with you, so we can like reflect on that moving forward and use that in our work and for Westminster and stuff like that. But thank you so much for coming. Hannah, do you want to maybe just close off and share any last thoughts? So
yeah, lovely. So I suppose one of the things about me living and working in rural areas, you don't always get a sense that you've got a network of people. So hopefully for me, this is opened my eyes to the fact that there is a network of people out there that are galvanized by a sort of a kind of overriding mission and commitment to sustainability, which is something that I think is really nice. So thank you.
Thank you.
thanks so much. Maybe we can make a little map or network of people in rural areas as well. That'd be nice just to
Do a green map if you want.
yeah, we can do that, exactly.
Yeah, that's maybe another thing as well. So one of the things that I'm working on is that the green, I touched on it a wee bit in my presentation, and I can share a link to it, but so I've been working with a team, an international team, to develop green map tools, which are about ethical mapping tools to support sustainable community development. So we've done the reuse map on that platform, and it's free to use, and it's an alternative to Google. But I can send you links to that.
Yeah.
Be great. Maybe we could have a map building co-working session day or something for all the different areas. That would be really nice. Yeah. Maybe if you send those links, Hannah, and we'll get them sent in the email early next week.
All right.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone, and hopefully see you soon at another call as well, or an in-person event as well. And well done. You're all very inspiring. I feel very energized. So keep going.
Likewise.
No. Thank
you.
you, everybody. Lovely to meet you all. See you again.
Bye.
Take
now.
care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.